What happens when two successful entrepreneurs get together for a drink? They talk shop, of course. So grab your favorite cocktail and sit alongside Scott DeLong and Vince Moiso, two seasoned business leaders that have driven their own companies to success, as they share from their experience and dive deep into the secret sauce that can turn a company around. The CEO Podcast starts now.
Hi, welcome to CEO Podcast. I'm Scott DeLong. I'm here with my friend Vince Moiso. Today, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence. So a few weeks back, we did the whole body language thing based on a listener wanting to know a little bit more on depth on the body language. And emotional intelligence utilizes body language. It's not the whole thing, but it utilizes body language. So thought we'd go a little bit deeper on that.
Sounds good.
So, back in 1990, Peter Salovey and John Mayer, who are professors, one at Yale and one at University of New Hampshire, wrote a paper on emotional intelligence. It was actually the first one that was written in this manner. They used to work on social intelligence, right?
Yeah.
But they turned this into an emotional intelligence. About 5 years later, Daniel Goleman wrote the best-selling book on emotional intelligence called Emotional Intelligence, and that really became popular. It became actually kind of a pop science kind of category on that. And it's become more and more talked about. We think we can do it better and better. Come to find out, we're not really good at it.
Yeah.
Without practice, like most things,
Yeah.
like hitting my golf ball.
Yeah.
If I don't practice that thing, I'm not very good at it.
Yeah.
So what's your thought process on the need, the value, why study this, why work on it, why practice? What do you get out of knowing more about emotional intelligence?
Well, self-awareness, right? So self-awareness for me is just the number one, and it's awareness of others, right? So there's all things that we can talk about around emotional intelligence is just understanding your own feelings and embracing what those feelings are and understanding or developing even the tools or a skill set to deal with those emotions, as well as recognizing emotion in others that may create empathy or even sympathy or at that point when you think of emotional intelligence, EQ, as you think of IQ, it's the level in which you have that awareness to observe and see what's going on with you and around you, such that your interaction with that, then all of a sudden, I have the ability to react in a certain way, say maybe the right thing, or it might just be me understanding what my response should be to get the best outcome out of that scenario. But I think we can, I could go on and on about that.
So you wrap the whole description, right? The academic description of emotional intelligence is the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, discriminate among them, and use the information to guide your thinking and actions.
Yeah.
That's actually the academic description of that. And you called it in your little
just paraphrased it.
Yeah.
Well, I get it from too. So I like to think that I have a high emotional intelligence, and I know and understand that I will always be working on that. Like, it's just something that I'm going to have to continue to work on for the rest of my life and become more and more aware. And so I want, the more I know of it, the more I want to know and understand around it. And, like this, you're way more adept at it than I am. And you've studied it way more than I have. In fact, you have a specific course, right, that you teach, that I've taken, that you made available to my EO Forum mates and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those things that I don't think you can ever fully learn it. I mean, in other words, I was pretty adept going into that course and was blown away at how much I got out of that course.
Well, sure. So even think about your EO Forum. So you had to try to talk people into going to the course.
Yeah.
Because I know the stuff, I've studied it, I know all about it, right?
Sure.
And in fact, several of your forum mates chose not to participate.
Yeah.
Time commitment and other things. Right?
Yeah, of course.
But if you feel you're pretty good about it. And when we got through that, we got through the course. I love what you just said. Found out how much I learned about myself during that.
Yeah.
If you recall, one of the goals I had for your group, for the group that went through that, is I really want you to get so much out of this that you make the other people jealous that they said I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did that come true?
It did. I don't know, some you're right. Like, so
Yeah.
there was a few of them, just, I think the time commitment and, some conflicts, I think prevented it. I think so.
Sure.
Mind was willing, but they just couldn't make it work. And then while others, it was interesting when we did give feedback. It was like, wow, yeah, I in retrospect, I should have done that.
I wish I would have spent the time.
Yeah.
And again, we're not finished, right? So that course happened to be only 5 weeks, an hour and a half a week for 5 weeks. And there's still so much more to go, right?
Yeah.
And all of that ends up being, most of it, a lot of it has to do with the awareness of others and the empathy towards others.
Yeah.
And in fact, when you talk about emotional intelligence, you see a lot of executives saying, well, all you have to do is read the room, right? And if I'm aware of them, I'm good. The fact of the matter is, I think it's much more important for the self-awareness
Couldn't agree
and
more.
self-management portion.
Yeah.
The first half of it. Like, I think you mentioned this in the body language. Take care of yourself and the other stuff will work out.
Yeah, it will.
Right?
You have to understand how you show up, especially if you're in a leadership role. In any given scenario, you don't have to be the owner of a business. You don't have to be the entrepreneur. If you're a high performer, if you're a leader in your business in any way, you have to be self-aware of how you are showing up to work. You are showing up with your peers, people that report to you or count on you. How do you show up for your family? It's like I was reminded of
not
this.
as good as I show up for other people.
No, I want to share this because I had this amazing, EO has put together this thing that they call Power Lunch, and you get together with other members within the EO Orange County group that maybe you haven't spent a lot of time with, and I got to spend time with these two other just amazing EOers, these amazing entrepreneurs, and I'm hearing the story of one. And we both did Landmark Worldwide together. And I was reminded of so many scenarios where when you're not self-aware, how oblivious you become of your own behavior, and you don't even realize how it's impacting others so negatively. And the people, what I was really reminded of, because for me, the instance was I was professionally showing up as an A+. Like I was showing up exactly the way I wanted to be seen and perceived. Yep. And I was shitting on those that were closest to me. And so those that I cared for the most were the ones that I was impacting, and I was completely oblivious to it.
They're going to forgive us easier. We can take advantage of them. They'll get over it. All those things come into play. And that's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's just wrong.
Yeah.
The people that are closest to deserve our best.
Well, so I want to say the key term, awareness.
Yeah.
And I was not aware of what was going on. I was not self-aware of that situation. And I sure as hell was not aware of the negative impact I was having on people that I love.
Yeah. And at that point, maybe you were aware of others and watching them, right?
Yeah.
Because most people think that's what emotional intelligence is, the awareness of others and reacting to that. And if that's all you're doing, you're missing at least half of it. The self-awareness and self-management. So we get into some situations where I hear I hear people talking about being able to control my emotions. No, not going to work. First of all, I don't want you to control it. What I want you to do is manage those emotions.
It's not about control.
They're real. Those emotions are real.
Yeah.
Whatever happened to you at work, wherever you were, that negative thing, someone cut you off on the freeway, I don't care what it is. Emotions are real.
Yeah.
Awareness of those emotions is the first step.
Yeah.
Understanding them. So, and I don't know, we talked about this in the body language one, where we can see when others are something, whatever, happy, sad, mad, angry, all that. And we can't necessarily see when we are. There are, if you go back to this course, if you recall, one of the things I asked you to do is at a given time, notice how you're feeling and where you were and what your surroundings were.
Yeah.
And then how does that manifest? So for me, anger, let's take anger because that's one that shows up, right?
Yeah.
When I'm not paying attention, it just shows up. When I am paying attention, I can actually feel it in my face.
Oh, yeah.
I can feel my face getting red, the warmth that comes through, the jugular and all those kind of things. And that's by paying attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once I'm aware of it, now what do I do with it? Do I just control it, put a lid on it? No, that's not the way it works. But I need to manage it based on the situation that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
Am I with clients? Am I with loved ones? Am I by myself? Those are all different ways of managing it. And there's not just one way to manage it. Managing it based on what you know about the other person and how they would respond to things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people I can cry in front of and people I wouldn't even think about crying in front of. I would hold back everything I wanted based on the awareness of them. So it's how this emotional intelligence ends up being the intersection of my awareness and yours, self-managing me, and the social skills I need to utilize in order to get through the situation with whoever it is that I'm with.
I'm smiling as you're saying all this because I'm thinking of driving a vehicle. There's no better example than the road rage that you get. This is just an example the other morning. I'm driving up Avenida Pico and somebody's pulling out of the super busy McDonald's right there off the freeway. It completely cuts me off.
Right.
And I'm, I like in the moment, just like I could feel just the pressure and everything come up to my neck and I'm getting red and I'm, what the hell? I'm screaming obscenities. And I like literally in a matter of 10 seconds, I went, what happened? Yeah. I didn't get in an accident. Right. I had to apply my brakes and it took 1 second out of my drive time, which I'm a mile away from my house.
And so what could happen if I didn't manage that emotion, if I let that get out of control?
God, I mean, well, then I'm chasing her down. I'm not paying attention to driving. I get in an accident after the fact. And, now I'm impacting others instead of just calming down, letting that pass through. And honestly, just to me is becoming aware of the ridiculousness of the behavior.
Yeah.
Of really when you break it down to what happened versus the immediate story I told myself where, what it is it's fear. It's this instant like shot of fear of that just happened. And reality is if you break it down, all I did was apply my brakes and I lost about a second in my commute time.
Sure. And what would have been the benefit of catching a person and telling them off?
Nothing.
Would you have enlightened them?
Nothing.
Would they have made a mistake later in their life that you could have? No.
I'd get an award for being right.
There you go.
I'd get a nice like little button award that I get to wear that says I'm right.
Yeah.
I get nothing. Okay. I get nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So I like your story of the driving because I laugh at myself. You know how, because this happens to me driving all the time. And I talk to myself about that. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but I'm talking to myself so I don't act out. So that's part of my self-management.
Yeah.
But I use remember the movie The Sixth Sense, the Bruce Willis movie?
Oh yeah.
At the end, the little boy says,
I see dead people.
Well, I see dumb people. And so that's how I laugh at myself. I see dumb people. Okay. And they probably didn't mean it, right? They didn't mean to do it. They're just dumb. They're just not aware. They're just whatever. And that's how I get through that portion of the managing that. Because I get mad. Absolutely. Get cut off. I get mad.
Well, and I always think of this too, because this is what makes me laugh. In you saying that too is like, let Hughes without sin cast the first stone, right? So it's like, I mean, I've cut my share of people off driving. I'm not the best driver, and so okay, I've made those mistakes as well. So why am I getting so upset over it? Why am I getting so angry at that? And it doesn't make sense, and it causes a lot of stress. Yeah. So when I go down that path, I realize just how much stress that causes. You can feel it in your shoulders and your neck, and so I'm really working. That's one thing that I'm really trying to work on is just gather yourself a little bit, take a deep breath, do whatever it is, talk to yourself. I don't care what it is. Do what you need to do to be aware of the behavior, aware of the trigger. Right. So triggers are super important. Be aware of what triggered that behavior and understand that, okay, if I recognize the trigger and I also am self-aware of the behavior that happens from that, I can do something about it.
Sure. So let's bring this back into the workplace. You ever get mad at work?
Of course.
Ever any dumb people at work? Like people that do dumb things. I don't mean
Yeah.
to say dumb people, but
Yeah.
people that do things that piss you off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yell and scream. How's that work?
It doesn't.
It makes you feel good for the second. Not even that, right?
Yeah.
So people, I had an old girlfriend that said this one time to me, and this was like 35 years ago. So it's been a long time, but she had a line that I just love, and I love it today. No one ever got ahead by trying to get even.
So
Like,
true.
It was just like, yeah. So I keep that in the back of my mind as part of my management tools. One of the tools I use to manage awareness first, because if I don't know I'm acting up, I don't know.
Well, shocking news alert. You actually don't get an award for being right.
I don't.
Yeah.
No trophies.
No.
No.
No certificates, no trophies.
More
no
negative
recognition.
impact than
Nothing.
positive.
No,
on that.
you get
Yeah.
nothing for being right. I mean that's what it boils down to. So when you start to strip out right or wrong, in that scenario.
So
then
let's take
you
a
can
scenario at
through
work. So someone, a subordinate, someone that works for you,
Yeah.
was supposed to do something.
Yeah.
They did it or didn't do it or did it in a way that you didn't like.
Yeah.
So what are the steps? What do you need to do? How do you get that anger diffused or the corrective action in place of anger? Do you have a process you go through?
Yeah, sure. It depends, right? So I think every situation is a little different, and it depends on the severity of it, the certainly the urgency of it, what that impacted and what others were impacted from that action or inactivity or whatever that might be. I'll tell you this: like if it's email driven, let's say, I'll just use that as a scenario, right? Where, I get the email notification and I may want to respond. I often do, and I write it, and it's not a very nice email. It's a nasty gram, right? I do not send it. Absolutely.
Good.
And I go through the motion of reading it and I delete it. And I do not respond for 24 hours. I sleep on it. Especially, it depends on the time of day for me and where my battery is at. And if my battery is low, then I know I'm not in a good mental space. I'm just very self-aware of where my energy is. And if I'm not in that good mental space, I wait. I have that commitment to myself. I give it 24 hours to respond because I know when I wake up the next morning, I'm completely recharged. I've had time to sleep and think on it. Then I know that my reaction to it is going to be very, very positive. And the first thing always is I follow. I think it's Stephen Covey's habit number 5: seek first to understand. So I'm always going to take that step. That's number one, because you used the term, okay, they didn't do it in the way that you expected them to do it.
Right.
Well, so when that is the case, I usually point the finger inward. I say to myself, you know what? Now I'll replay the conversation or the directions that I provided, and I'll remember that, you know what? I didn't ask them to repeat it to me.
What did I ask them?
Yeah, so they heard what they heard,
understanding?
and their
Sure.
understanding of it may have been different than what I was trying to get across. And so seek first to understand is number one. Behind the fact that, taking my own temperature of where my energy is at. And if I'm in a good place to do it, I'm going to seek first to understand. If I'm not, I'm going to wait till the next morning. Then I'm going to seek first to understand. And then from there, I can actually get down to what happened instead of creating a story around it and getting upset over it. And then once you break down what happened and you get to the root of it, then you can provide a solution. So the second component for me is just being always solutions based. Seek first to understand, be solutions based.
Okay. So we'll take an example. So let me go back to the email piece first. I write it out too, but before I write it, and someone gave me this tip, and I practice it now because I don't hit send. Well, I can accidentally hit send.
Yeah.
So I delete the to line before I type it out.
Call.
It's like
Good call.
It was like whoever told me that was brilliant,
Yeah.
because accidentally I could hit that send button and boom, it's out. That's not what I want to say.
Yeah.
So add that to your email protocol will be helpful. I like to live from here forward.
Yeah.
All these things that happened in the past, they're history, they're for learning, they're for whatever, right? And so that's a part of my growth in emotional intelligence. And I certainly have more to grow, because I was talking to some folks today about this, is that I've been studying this stuff for the last 11, 12 years now and getting better at it. And honestly, I'm getting better at it. And I make mistakes too.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I want to do when I make a mistake, apologize to the person that I hurt. Great. And that's harder than you think. Apologizing for making a mistake is not an easy thing to do with some people, because they may not react well.
No,
I don't care if they react well or not. I'm going to apologize for that.
Yeah.
The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to forgive myself for that indiscretion, because I do believe this: 2 steps forward and 1 step backward is still progress.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for progress.
Yeah.
So anyway, I got a long way to go.
Well, relationships, I think, so you took it to the workplace, and I thought those were great. Those are perfect examples, and those are tools that our listeners could take those and implement them tomorrow. I think where it's even, I mean, for me, the most progress has been in my relationship with my wife. Like, that's where emotional intelligence has just really, kicked off, because, and who better for it to work on than with your spouse? Absolutely. But, so we have these agreements with each other. And I talked about energy and battery, and I've said this before, where, we know if there's a discussion at night and neither one of us have the battery left to have what I'd call a productive conversation around it, we call time out. And we have this agreement where it's like, okay, great, we're going to sleep on it. And we'll come back the next day and we'll have a discussion. And what's so funny about that is more 9 times out of 10, we wake up the next morning and we're like, doesn't really matter. Don't even need to have that conversation. I'm over it. Right. So, it's so great to just have an understanding and have that self-awareness, and have your partner have the self-awareness too, is insane. So now all of a sudden, you've got this EQ growing at the same time as your partner's EQ is growing. Man, it just enhances the relationship to this whole other level. So
I laughed during that, because I remember the advice that was given right before I got married: never go to bed angry. Yeah, well, it sounds like good advice, and it's not. So let's keep hashing this thing out till neither of us get any sleep, and we still can't get a solution.
No,
whereas that good night's sleep
work.
changes the process.
It doesn't work. And in fact, if you don't go down the road in the first place, you're not going to bed angry. So you've accomplished both.
There you go.
So reality is that when you have that agreement, you're not going to go to bed angry, right? Because we also have the agreement is like, I'm gonna kiss her goodnight regardless, right? And that's just what's gonna happen. And we just have that, and we know we can wake up the next morning, and if we need to continue the conversation, we will, and we have, and it's been 10x productive. But I don't, just for the listener's sake, is that can be with your partner, that can be in business, that can be in any relationship you have with your friend, your brother, your mom, but whoever it is. I think those are all perfect opportunities to continue to practice this EQ, this journey toward EQ at a high level.
So let's give some practical advice here on things that we can do, or things that the listeners can do, and I can continue to do, to get better with this whole emotional intelligence process.
Yeah.
Right? So the self-awareness piece. We do something in the course, where 3 or 4 times a day, send out a text message to notice your surroundings and notice your mood, right? What am I feeling right now? And see if there's any triggers that made me happy, sad, whatever, any of those things, and just kind of jot it down. And then at the end of that exercise at night, take a look at that paper. I have 4 different instances: one that I was happy, one that I was angry, one that I was sad, one that I was whatever, right? And just journal about it.
Yeah.
What was the trigger? Why do I think that came up? And what, if I'm being my best self, how would I act? Right? Just a little journaling piece right there. So that does 2 things. That gets you the self-awareness and the self-management portion. If you took the time to do it just for a week, those 4 times in the day where you've got an emotion. See if you can step outside yourself and look at yourself like a disinterested third party and say, where did that come from? What does it matter? Why did that happen? What would my best self do in this situation? We might not have acted in our best self at that time, but go back and write it out a little bit.
I agree. Writing it down is so powerful.
Yeah. And the other thing is on the awareness of others. So one of the things that I like to do is tell people, take a walk in the mall, take a walk in the grocery store and watch the interactions. In fact, I just talked to someone today about that and said, well, gosh, I wasn't at work. I was on vacation. You didn't have a chance during vacation to look at an interaction. I said, didn't you just tell me a story about some guy that was a jerk to the ticket taker?
Yeah.
And that's a story. And the awareness and watching other people.
Of course.
And take that back into the body language.
Yeah.
Turn off the volume. They could be so far away that you don't even hear what they're saying.
Yeah.
And you can relate to that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So paying attention to others and seeing what I can learn from that.
I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction,
Okay.
and I'm going to give just a couple of book recommendations.
Good.
And one of the books that was super impactful for me toward this journey of really understanding emotional intelligence is Happiness Hypothesis. Jonathan Haidt,
Okay.
And he's a psychologist. And it's just a powerful book because, you understand obviously at a high level that actually happiness is a choice. And when you start to realize that your own happiness is a choice, you start to realize also that you can choose how you act in really any situation. It is a choice.
Yeah.
The second book that I would offer to you guys is a book called Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith.
Good.
And that's another great one. We talk a lot about triggers in this podcast. And I think that book was the first book where I really understood the root, right? Where I was becoming very self-aware of the behavior, but not really aware of what was triggering the behavior. And then I read that book and I went, that was kind of the aha moment.
So I like taking that trigger even a step further than that, is to figure out, why was that a trigger?
Yeah.
Usually it comes from something in childhood. Don't fool yourself. A mom and dad messed us all up. Great, whatever.
Yeah.
But I try to understand where the why. So I really unwind it down to why is that a trigger? Right. And that helps me unwind that and make it not a trigger in the future. It does help. Now, does it solve it overnight? No. All this stuff takes time. It takes practice. Just because I've read a book doesn't mean I'm going to be an expert on the thing.
No, you've got to. I mean, the one thing is when you do read a book, right? Or when you take a course or you go to a seminar or whatever it is, right? You can do all of these things around emotional intelligence. However, when you walk away from those, you finish the book or walk away from, you have to execute on all those notes that you took, all the notes you're taking in this podcast, all the things that you're listening to. You actually have to then go out in the world and execute on that. It's not enough. And then, as we said at the beginning, it is a lifelong journey, right? It's this lifelong learning, right? You just have to be committed to lifelong learning. That's the end of the story. And so emotional intelligence is just a part of that journey.
Yeah, 2/5 of the 5 pieces of it are awareness, self, and others.
Yeah.
So, and that's the journey we need to go on. So we're at the end of the podcast right now. So this is fun. We'll probably talk about emotional intelligence again, give more hip tips, because I don't think there's anything more important than being aware of yourself and what you can do to influence the behaviors of others.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right.
Yeah. As always, we want to hear from you. So please, if you've got suggestions for other topics or expanding on topics that we've already talked about in our podcast, we'd love to hear from you and get your feedback. And thank you for listening. So until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining us for the CEO Podcast. To learn more about Scott and Vince, please visit theceopodcast.net and check out the calendar to tune in for our next episode. While on this site, you can also listen to past episodes, access additional content created for our listeners, and if you would like to dive deeper into any topic, there is an option to schedule some time with Scott or Vince. Thanks for listening.